Hello there, welcome back to Coasting the Planet. That is a Lego roller coaster, which is pretty cool, so definitely focus your attention on that and not the piles of junk sitting around. Yeah, I've definitely got a lot of stuff to get in order for the new year. Speaking of which, today is December 31st, 2022, the last day of 2022. I don't know about anybody else, but this year went by really fast for me, particularly the end of it. It feels like Thanksgiving was yesterday. It was not, it was a month ago. So in an ideal world, I would have loved to have done a lot of end of the year type stuff, but it is the end of the year, so what do we have time to do? So today we're gonna wrap up 2022 by ranking the parks that I visited this year, because what else am I gonna do on a coaster channel? Really only have time to do one quick end of the year video, and this seemed like the most fun one to do, so this is what we're doing. I am going to be excluding the 3 mountain coasters I rode this year, which would be Smoky Mountain Alpine Coaster, Goats on the Roof, both in Pigeon Forge, and then Rushmore Mountain Coaster in I think it was South Dakota. So yeah, I've ridden a roller coaster in South Dakota. Those are all basically like standalone attractions though, and they didn't really fit into what I wanted to do for this video, which was basically rank the parks based on the experiences I had visiting the parks. That doesn't work quite the same with standalone attractions, which is why I am going to exclude those 3. So I'll take those out of the equation, and I was actually able to visit 6 different unique theme parks this year. Most of the vlogs and videos for those you will find on Variety Entertainment Studios, which is my other channel where I post, well, basically anything. But then around November of this year, of course, I decided that I wanted to have a separate channel devoted to amusement and theme park content. And as a result, pretty much everything from the year up until November is on the other channel, so you can find those videos there. Luckily, I did not have any bad experiences at any amusement parks this year, but also just the kind of person I am, I can have fun at pretty much any amusement park, even if the conditions aren't great. So for me to have a bad experience at a park, it means something was really screwed up. So I guess it was a good thing I didn't have any truly bad experiences. And for this ranking, I'm going to be looking at my experiences this year and not necessarily ranking the parks overall based on what they offer, or value, or anything like that. Just which parks offered me the best experience in 2022. So at number 6 is Kentucky Kingdom in Louisville, Kentucky, which I feel bad saying is the worst park experience I had this year, but again, I didn't really have any truly bad ones. So I and my friend Nathan, who's also a coaster enthusiast, visited this park for both of our first times last year in 2021, and we had a very good time. This is a very quirky park, and it's had a kind of rough history that kind of contributes to some of its quirkiness. It's been owned by the Kentucky State Fair Board for, I think, the entirety of its life, but the operating rights have passed between an individual owner to Six Flags to being abandoned to back to the same original private owner to now finally landing in Herschend Family Entertainment's portfolio. But that's contributed to the park feeling like multiple different parks in one, because different managements have left their footprint all over the place. Also, there's a road that just kind of cuts this park in half. I can't think of another amusement park. I'm sure there's one somewhere, but it's not very often that there's just a road running through the middle of the park and you have to cross a bridge or a crosswalk to cross between the halves of the park. It shares a parking lot with the Kentucky State Convention Center, which is kind of confusing sometimes, but overall there's just a lot of quirkiness to this park, which is not necessarily a bad thing at all. And actually on our first visit last year, we had a lot of fun exploring the park's quirks, and just since we were there for the first time, riding some awesome roller coasters like Storm Chaser and Lightning Run for the first time, I think any of the negatives were kind of overshadowed by the uniqueness of the park and seeing everything for the first time and all that excitement. So this year, we went back for round 2, and while we still had a pretty enjoyable experience overall, let's just say some of the less desirable aspects of the park started to shine a little bit more now that the luster of visiting for the first time had worn off. The back half of the park looks like a post-apocalyptic wasteland from a zombie survival horror movie. The operations around the park, in terms of how fast they dispatch trains on the ride and stuff like that, are probably the worst operations I've ever experienced at an amusement park personally. There's really not much shade through most of the park, and I don't know why we didn't notice that last time since it was about the same temperature, but we were burning up this time. It was hot. We also had a terrible experience with food service, which funny enough, we had a pretty bad experience with food service last year too, so maybe something's just up with their food service in general that they need to figure out. I don't know. None of the rides have any theming, which is fine. I'm definitely an advocate for theming on rides, but I definitely accept and understand that sometimes it's just not necessary or doesn't fit with the park or the type of ride that you're going for. So I can excuse lack of theming as long as there's good aesthetics going on, but a lot of times in Kentucky Kingdom, it's just not. Like, Lightning Run by itself is a beautiful roller coaster, but the station building is hideous. And I know that's a reused station building from Grease Lightning, and they were just trying to save money as much as possible to get the park reopened after being abandoned for a couple years. But we're at the point where it's probably time to replace that and some of the other reused buildings around the park, or at least get them up to shape where they don't look so ugly. I don't know. I could probably go on for a while longer, but I think we both walked away from Kentucky Kingdom feeling not as great as last year. It's still a fun park. I recommend visiting some very fun roller coasters, but aside from the rides in isolation, the park itself could use a lot of work. As I mentioned, it's just been acquired by Hirsch and Family Entertainment, who owns and operates specifically Silver Dollar City and Dollywood, which are considered to be two of the best managed and most beautiful parks in the country. So hopefully they can work some magic and fix some stuff, but it's going to take a lot. Next up at number 5, I have Beech Bend Park in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And I'm only putting this ahead of Kentucky Kingdom because, again, this is about my experiences this year, and I genuinely just had a better time at Beech Bend. If I was just ranking parks, I would say Kentucky Kingdom is probably a better park than Beech Bend. It has more to offer at a similar price point, so it's kind of the better deal, and it's just overall Kentucky Kingdom's a better park, but had a better time at Beech Bend this year. This is my home park when I grew up in the Nashville area. I mean, an hour and a half away is pretty far to call a home park, but it is the closest park to Nashville by a pretty considerable margin, so you take it or you leave it. And I'm happy to take it. It's still my home park when I'm home in Nashville for any kind of extended period of time, specifically over the summers, and I do enjoy the place. It's kind of a relic of the past from when theme parks used to be individual family-operated units that were very small and scattered all over the place in almost every city. Nowadays, the industry has transitioned over time towards more of a model of larger-scale, corporately owned theme parks that are distanced much farther apart, but there are still many of these small, old, classic family amusement parks dotting the landscape if you know where to find them, and Beech Bend is one of them. It's a park where you have to go in with the right expectation. It's basically just a permanently installed fairground that happens to have a pretty decent GCI, is what I tell people. And it is a very decent GCI. I love some rides on Kentucky Rumbler. But overall, how small this park is really what makes it fun for me. There's pretty much never anybody there, so you can just walk onto any ride you want. You can circle the whole park in like 5 minutes, so you never have to plan out where you're going to walk to based on what's close to each other. You never have to plan out based on crowds and lines. You just don't have to plan, which is something I can't say about most other theme parks. You can just show up to Beech Bend, do whatever you want, and leave. And because it's so easy to do everything you want to do in a day there, you can just kind of chill for quite a bit, take in the scenery, and just relax in a way that I find that you can't do at many other theme parks. And it's when you get to a place like Beech Bend and you get to just relax like that and take in the sights and the sounds and ride rides when you want to ride them that I feel like what it means to be a coaster or amusement park enthusiast really comes through, and I really like that. Also, it definitely helped that this year I got to visit again with my friend Nathan, who you'll hear about a lot, I'm sure. We had a great time. I definitely recommend if you visit a place like Beech Bend that you bring a friend that you know you're going to have a lot of fun with, whether that is a fellow enthusiast or just a normal person. It really doesn't matter, as long as it's someone you know you can have a good time with, because half the fun of a place like Beech Bend is just walking around and screwing around, and it's not as fun to do that by yourself. Next up at number 4 is Carowinds in Charlotte, North Carolina. It feels kind of weird to have Carowinds this low on the list, but it's just because the list is so short. Carowinds is a fantastic park that I have so much fun visiting. I love so many of the rides there, like Fury 325, and Copperhead Strike is super underrated. And overall, I think a lot of people just don't appreciate enough how beautiful this park is. The landscaping is great. They've done a lot of work upping the theming and stuff recently, and I had a lot of fun on my visits this year. When I visited last year, the park was just so crowded it was miserable, so I really just didn't have a good time. But this year, both times I visited, the parks were a little bit less crowded, so I got to, well, do a lot more, and I got to visit during Winterfest this year, see their Christmas lights and stuff, and overall, I really enjoy Carowinds. It's not quite to the top tier of parks that I visited, but it's pretty far up there on the list for me as being a very great park, and just barely missed the top 3 of parks that I experienced this year. But if I had thrown Carowinds into another year, it may have made it a lot higher. I just had some other pretty great experiences at parks this year. At number 3, I placed Dollywood in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, which is a park that I'm sure would have ranked a lot higher if it wasn't my home park when I'm at school. But of course, I'm going to school in Knoxville, which means Dollywood's only about 45 minutes away, so I'm there all the time, as you can imagine that I would be. I've heard a similar sentiment from a lot of other people that when a park really is your home park to that extent, that your perspective on it starts to change a lot. It's not that you don't enjoy going there, but it feels less like an exciting experience and more like just a second home. You get to know it a lot better and on a deeper level, but also the excitement of, oh, I haven't been here in a while, obviously fades away because you were here 2 or 3 weeks ago. But at the same time, you have more of a Beech Bend style experience because you're not trying to cram in as many rides as you can and stuff, because it's not the worry of, oh, I don't know when I'll be back here again, because you know you'll be back here again in another couple of weeks. So overall, it's just a different way to experience the park, and it's changed how I've really felt about Dollywood and the experiences I've had there this year. It's still one of my favorite parks ever, but again, having it as a home park, you start to notice a lot more some of the issues, like their food service has definitely gone downhill this year. And I'm not sure I would have noticed that as much if I wasn't here all the time, but since I am, you notice those things. Dollywood's moving in the right direction on so many things, but it feels like there's a lot of things that they're also taking steps back on, and you just notice it so much more when you're there all the time. So that's probably why I put Dollywood at number 3, but it's still one of my favorite amusement parks of all time, and a place you should definitely get to if you can, get there. Very excited for them to open Big Bear Mountain, new roller coaster next year. I'll hopefully be there on opening weekend, and that might be my first opening weekend for a roller coaster if Air Force One doesn't open first, because I will try to get to Air Force One's opening weekend as well. Moving along so that I actually have time to edit this and get it up before midnight. Number 2 is Holiday World in Santa Claus, Indiana. Holiday World is a park that's just really special, and it's really hard to describe what makes this park so great. It's something that you really just have to experience to believe. I have met some people that are not Holiday World fans, but most people I've met agree that it's just an experience that you have to fully understand. But this park is amazing. There's a lot of theming that feels very cheap and 90s, but it's very charming in that way. That's the thing. This park just has a lot of charm as you walk around. It's family owned, and you can really feel that. But it's one of the larger family owned theme parks in the country, so it's not like Beech Bend or something where it's like kind of a fairground. They actually have the money and the budget to kind of build these larger attractions, but also keep that kind of family charm to them, which is, I don't know, you just don't get that very much. Usually if I see a ride the size of Voyage or Thunderbird, it's at a location that's very corporate. And Holiday World is just doesn't feel corporate. There's a lot of great amenities when you walk around the park, like they offer free soft drinks, which you really don't believe how much that changes the experience until you get there and you realize that not only do you not have to spend $5 to get a Coca-Cola or Pepsi with your meal, you can just get Pepsi all freaking day. It changes everything. Plus the ride collection, while not comparable to a park like Carowinds or Dollywood, is still like really good. Voyage and Thunderbird are both amazing. Raven and Legend help, give them something else. I've never been die-hard fans of those rides, but I sure am glad that they're there. Their maintenance team does such an incredible job taking care of all their rides, and anyways, I'm talking too much about Holiday World in general and not the experience I had this year, but this year was probably my best visit to Holiday World ever, I think. We just overall had a ton of fun. We got to go into the water park. I was with Nathan again. Go figure. That's the other thing Holiday World has. One of the best water parks ever. Would be one of the best water parks ever, even as a standalone water park, but it's included with the park admission. So a lot of fun there. And then this was the first year that they've had their new drone show, which really blew me away. So they have this like plaza thing that was actually an old section of the water park, but they've redone it into what they call a party plaza, which was just totally blew my expectations out of the water. They had like colored laser lights going everywhere and like a drink station and stuff, which of course the drinks are free, and so that was pretty dang cool. And then the drone show itself was probably the best theme park drone show that I've ever seen. I really enjoyed it. It was a very tiring day overall. Driving 3 hours there, spending like, I think we were there for almost 12 hours straight, and then driving 3 hours back to the Nashville area it was a tiring experience. If I do that again, I might consider a hotel. However, it was totally worth it. Again, probably the best Holiday World visit I ever had, and one of the best theme park visits I've ever had. Just such a fantastic place, and this year it was just as good as always. Plus that drone show was just something else, especially the way they did that whole plaza area. But of course, that's only number 2, because number 1 belongs to Kings Island in Mason, Ohio, just north of Cincinnati. And wow, this park's great. This was definitely the best experience I had visiting a theme park this year. Kings Island's kind of a special park for me because it was back in 2017 when I visited Kings Island that I really identify as being the transition point where I became, at least where I would identify as a coaster enthusiast. Beforehand, I was really into researching like Disney and Universal rides, but I'd never really looked at anything outside of that realm. But then it was on a church trip in 2017 when we visited Kings Island, and was where I really overcame my fear of roller coasters. My first big roller coasters were Expedition Everest and Incredible Hulk. And I said I got over my fears then, but I was still pretty nervous stepping in line at Kings Island. But by the end of the day at Kings Island, I didn't care anymore, and ever since then I've never really gotten scared for a roller coaster. Additionally, something about the park atmosphere at Kings Island was just something else and fascinated me, which made me start doing research on Kings Island afterward, and I was just so fascinated by the rich history that this park has that's really where I ended up just falling into the rabbit hole of coaster enthusiasm, and here we are now. So I'm really thankful for Kings Island allowing me to discover this awesome community of awesome people who just love the amusement industry. So holding such a special place in my heart, I was really excited this year when we decided we were going to go back, for me, the first time in 5 years. But my friend Nathan, who accompanied me, actually hadn't been since 2013, so almost 10 years for him. And we had a fantastic time. I don't know how he feels about it, but this is definitely my favorite theme park visit from the year. Maybe Nathan will drop down in the comments below what his ranked park visits from this year were, because he got to visit some parks that I didn't get to, like Six Flags Magic Mountain. Just some small, obscure places like that. But yeah, no, returning to Kings Island was everything that I hoped it would be. I got to ride rides like Mystic Timbers and Orion for the first time, which were fantastic, and I love the theming on those. Of course, it's nowhere near like Disney or Universal level theming, but honestly, it's good enough for me to feel immersed in some kind of storyline that goes beyond just riding a random roller coaster. And I really love that kind of stuff. And Kings Island seems to be continuing to move in that direction. And I'm really excited to see what the future of the park is with that and stuff like what they're going to build on the Vortex plot of land. It's funny, they actually have less roller coasters now than they did last time I was there, but every single one of them was pretty good. I was particularly blown away by the retracking that they did on the Racer. That was just perfect. Flight of Fear, I forgot how great that ride was. Probably one of the most underrated coasters ever. Definitely the most underrated coaster at Kings Island. And just the way that this park is done, everything about it, the way it's laid out, the atmosphere, the management, is just all great. Also probably the second best merch at a theme park behind Holiday World. Holiday World has the best merch, but just the way you step into the gates at Kings Island and are immediately in that big plaza with the fountains and the Eiffel Tower is just, in my opinion, the best entry experience for a theme park ever. And that includes the Disney and Universal parks. Stepping out onto International Street was just, for me, so much more impactful than Main Street USA at Disney. And I might get some flack for saying that, but I'm saying it anyway. It's also Kings Island's 50th anniversary this year, and I really love what they did with their 50th anniversary with the logos and the color palette choices and stuff. I know Cedar Fair seems to be doing the same thing across the chain. Carowinds is going to be doing a similar theme thing next year, but I feel like the execution at Kings Island was above and beyond what they needed to do, which again comes down to park management. I'm interested to see Carowinds' 50th anniversary celebration next year, but I don't think it's going to be near as good as Kings Island. I just don't think it is, because as great as Carowinds is, they're just not Kings Island. We spent 2 days at Kings Island, and on the second day we watched their 50th anniversary show, and I really liked they had this like custom soundtrack for the show and everything, and it was a really well done show with lots of lighting and fire effects and stuff. And even for someone that's only been to this park twice ever, it was emotional, really. They did a really good job with conjuring the emotions of the 50th anniversary in that whole show. I just really enjoyed it. And I might do a whole retrospective on that show at some point, because I think it was just so well done. I could kind of sit here all day and just talk about how awesome our experience at Kings Island was. Literally the only problem I think I had the whole time was that food prices are a little high, but that's just kind of a Cedar Fair corporate thing. Their food prices are about the same across the board at all of their parks, and it's probably the best quality Cedar Fair food I've ever had. So we'll let the prices slide there. So yeah, Kings Island, definitely the best park visit that I had this year. Best park I visited this year too. I don't know when I'm going to get back there again, but I'm really excited about the possibility of getting back to that park again. Even if they don't get like a new coaster anytime soon, I would still go back. It's just such a great park on so many levels. Rich history, beautiful landscaping, moving in the right direction on pretty much everything, at least in my opinion, of what I like to see in a park. Great centerpiece and entrance. There's always room to improve, but Kings Island is probably the closest to perfection that I've seen in a regional amusement park. All right, that's it. Those are the 6 unique parks I visited this year. Obviously, I visited parks a lot more than 6 times because I did a lot of repeat visits. I went to Carowinds twice. I went to Beech Bend like 3 times, but only vlogged one of them. Obviously, tons of visits to Dollywood, went and did the mountain coasters. So overall, a very great year for theme and amusement parks and roller coasters for me. But hopefully, 2023, gosh, that sounds weird, will be even better. My goal is to beat the record of 6 unique parks next year. I think that'll be pretty easy to do, actually, but hopefully I can get on some new coasters. But I'll definitely be returning to a lot of these parks again next year because, well, I'm not always about just trying to get to new places. Sometimes it's fun to re-experience places that you've already been. Anyways, hope everybody has a great New Year's. Feel free to put down in the comments what some of your favorite parks you visited this year are. Seems crazy that it already is the new year, but that's just how it goes. Very excited for this new year. A lot of things that I need to just get straightened out and figured out with these YouTube channels and beyond, but I am pretty excited about where hopefully some of this stuff will be able to go, getting into a better groove on what I want these channels to be and such. So all stuff that will hopefully get figured out in the new year. Thank you all so much for helping me already get to 100 subscribers within like a month and a half of the channel going live. That's pretty awesome for me. Everything is relative, but for my standards, that's pretty cool. So I appreciate that y'all find this interesting to watch for some reason, and see you in the new year.